The distant rumble of thunder echoed across the vast Wyoming plains as Clara Porter clutched her newborn son to her chest, her steps faltering with each labored breath. At just 22, she had already endured more hardship than most women twice her age. The year was 1878, and the promise of a new life in the West had turned to bitter desperation as she stumbled along the dusty trail, her supplies depleted and her strength waning. Clara's face was gaunt, her once vibrant auburn hair now limp and dull from weeks of poor nutrition. The small bundle in her arms whimpered, his tiny face scrunched in discomfort. She had named him James, after her father, though she called him Jamie. He was barely 2 weeks old, born in a small mining town where Clara had stopped when she could travel no further in her condition. Now they were alone, heading toward the settlement of Whispering Pines, where she had heard there might be work for a woman who could sew and cook. "Just a little further, my love," Clara whispered, though she knew they were still miles from their destination. Her legs trembled beneath her worn skirts, and her vision blurred with exhaustion. When her knees finally buckled, Clara managed to twist her body to avoid crushing Jamie as she collapsed onto the hard-packed earth. The baby began to cry in earnest now, his wails carrying across the empty landscape. Clara tried to rise, but her arms shook too violently to push herself up. The edges of her vision darkened as she struggled to remain conscious. "Jamie," she murmured, her hand resting on his swaddled form beside her. "I'm sorry, my sweet boy." The sound of hoofbeats penetrated her fading awareness. Clara tried to call out, but her voice emerged as a mere whisper. The rhythmic thuds grew louder, then stopped abruptly. Through half-closed eyes, she saw dust-covered boots approach before a tall figure knelt beside her. "Madam, can you hear me?" The voice was deep, concerned. Clara forced her eyes open, finding herself looking up at a weathered face beneath the brim of a wide cowboy hat. The man's features were sharp but kind, his eyes the color of a summer sky. "My baby," she managed. "Please, help my baby." The man gently lifted the crying infant, cradling him with surprising tenderness for hands so large and calloused. "He looks hungry, but otherwise all right," he said, his gaze returning to Clara. "What's your name, madam?" "Clara," she whispered.
Clara Porter.
"I'm Xavier Sutton," he replied. "Most folks call me Xander. My ranch is about a mile back."
Can you stand if I help you?
Clara tried to nod, but even that small motion sent pain shooting through her head. She reached weakly for her son, but her arms refused to cooperate, falling limply to her sides. Xander's expression softened as he watched her struggle. He looked down at the infant in his arms, who had quieted somewhat in his secure hold. Then, with determination in his eyes, he said words that would change both their lives forever. "You're too weak to lift your baby, madam. Don't worry, I'll be his father until you're well again." Without waiting for a response, Xander carefully positioned Jamie in one arm and used his free hand to help Clara to her feet. When her legs immediately gave way, he swept her up alongside her child, carrying them both to his waiting horse. "Hold on, Miss Porter," he said, settling her in the saddle before mounting behind her. "I've got you both now." Clara leaned back against the solid warmth of his chest, too exhausted to protest or question this stranger's kindness. As consciousness slipped away, she felt the secure circle of his arm around her waist, keeping her and Jamie safe as the horse began to move. When Clara next opened her eyes, she found herself in an unfamiliar bed, the rough cotton sheets clean but worn. Sunlight streamed through a nearby window, illuminating a simple room with wooden furniture and faded curtains. For a moment, panic seized her as she remembered her baby. "Jamie," she called, her voice cracking from disuse. The door opened immediately, and a middle-aged woman with gray-streaked hair entered, carrying a cup of something steaming. "Your little one is just fine, dear," the woman said kindly. "Xander's got him out in the kitchen. I'm Martha, by the way. Martha Sutton, Xander's aunt. Clara tried to sit up, but found herself still weak. How long have I been here? 3 days, Martha replied, helping Clara into a sitting position and offering her the cup.
Broth.
You need to build your strength. You were in a bad way when Xander brought you in feverish and half-starved. Clara sipped the warm liquid gratefully. My baby is thriving, Martha assured her. We found a goat's milk formula that agrees with him. Xander's been caring for him while I tended to you. This revelation stunned Clara into silence. A stranger, a cowboy caring for her newborn son? The thought seemed absurd, yet here she was, alive and recovering because of his intervention. I'd like to see him, Clara said after finishing the broth. Martha nodded and disappeared, returning moments later with Xander, who carried Jamie carefully in his large hands. The sight of her son in the cowboy's arms created an unexpected feeling in Clara's chest, something warm and frightening all at once. He's been good as gold, Xander said, his voice softer than Clara remembered. Only cries when he's hungry or needs changing. Clara extended her arms, and Xander gently placed Jamie in them. The baby's face was fuller than before, his cheeks rosy with health. Clara's eyes filled with tears as she looked from her son to his rescuer. I don't know how to thank you, Mr. Sutton. Xander, he corrected with a small smile. And no thanks needed. Couldn't leave you two out there, could I? His eyes met hers, and Clara felt a strange flutter in her stomach that had nothing to do with her physical weakness. Xander Sutton was not what she had expected, tall and lean with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. He possessed a quiet dignity that belied his frontier appearance. She noticed a faint scar running along his jawline, a testament to some past hardship. Once you're stronger, we can talk about getting you to wherever you were headed, he said, breaking the momentary silence. Clara looked down at Jamie, then back at Xander. I was going to Whispering Pines. I heard they needed seamstresses there. That's a hard journey with a newborn, Martha commented, adjusting Clara's pillows. Especially alone. Xander nodded in agreement. The Pines is still 3 days' ride from here, and the trail's not easy. Winter will be coming before long. I don't have much choice, Clara admitted. Jamie's father. She hesitated, the words catching in her throat. He's not in the picture anymore. A look passed between Xander and Martha that Clara couldn't quite interpret. Then Xander straightened his shoulders and spoke with calm authority. You'll stay here until you're fully recovered. Then we'll figure out what comes next. Over the following days, Clara gradually regained her strength under Martha's watchful care. Each morning and evening, Xander would bring Jamie to her, sometimes staying to talk while she fed or held her son. Through these conversations, Clara learned that Xander had inherited the modest ranch from his father 5 years earlier, after returning from fighting in the final days of the Civil War as a very young soldier. His mother had died when he was a boy, and his Aunt Martha had come to help raise him. Now 30 years old, he ran the ranch with the assistance of 2 hands and Martha's domestic support. In turn, Clara shared pieces of her own story, her childhood in Ohio, her hasty marriage to a charming drifter who abandoned her upon learning of her pregnancy, and her desperate journey west in search of a new beginning. She found herself surprisingly comfortable confiding in Xander, whose quiet responses never carried judgment. 2 weeks after her arrival, Clara was finally strong enough to leave her bed for extended periods. She insisted on helping Martha with household tasks, grateful to be useful after so much time being cared for. It was during one such afternoon, as Clara sat at the kitchen table mending one of Xander's shirts, that she witnessed something that touched her deeply. Through the window, she could see Xander sitting on the porch, Jamie cradled in one arm while he read aloud from a dog-eared book. The baby was awake but peaceful, seemingly content to listen to the rumble of the cowboy's voice. He's good with children, Martha observed, following Clara's gaze. Always has been, though he's had little opportunity to show it. Has he never married? Clara asked, immediately regretting the personal nature of the question. Martha's expression grew somber. There was a girl once. Sarah was her name. They were to be wed 6 years ago, but she took ill with influenza that winter. Didn't survive. Clara felt a pang of sympathy. I'm sorry. That must have been terrible for him. It was, Martha agreed. For a time, I feared he'd never open his heart again. He threw himself into the ranch, working from dawn till dusk. But lately... She paused, her eyes still on her nephew. Lately, I've seen glimpses of the old Xander returning. Clara said nothing, but her gaze lingered on the man and baby, an unfamiliar longing taking root within her heart. That evening, after Jamie had been settled in the cradle Xander had fashioned from an old wooden box, Clara joined the cowboy on the porch. The autumn air carried a crisp chill, and she wrapped her borrowed shawl tighter around her shoulders. Thank you, she said simply, for everything you've done for us. Xander turned toward her, his profile outlined against the setting sun. Anyone would have done the same.
No, Clara replied firmly.
Not anyone. Most would have left us, or at best, dropped us at the nearest town. You've given us a home when we needed one most. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the distant lowing of cattle. Finally, Xander spoke, his voice low and thoughtful. I've been thinking. Winter's coming soon, another month, and the passes might be snowed in. Traveling to Whispering Pines with Jamie would be dangerous until spring. Clara nodded, having reached the same conclusion herself. I know. I've been worried about what to do. Xander cleared his throat, seeming uncharacteristically nervous. You could stay here. Through the winter, I mean. We have the room, and Martha enjoys having another woman around. Clara's heart quickened at the suggestion. I couldn't impose. It's not an imposition, he interrupted. And you could earn your keep, if that's what worries you. Martha's getting older. She could use help with the house. And I noticed you're handy with a needle. He gestured to his mended shirt. You're sure? Clara asked, afraid to hope too strongly. Xander's eyes met hers directly. I'm sure. As the days shortened and the first snow dusted the distant mountains, Clara settled into life at the Sutton ranch. Each morning, she would rise early to help Martha prepare breakfast for Xander and his 2 ranch hands, Pete and Caleb. Then, with Jamie either sleeping in his cradle or secured in a sling Martha had fashioned, Clara would tend to household chores, cooking, cleaning, mending, and occasionally helping with the vegetable garden that supplied much of their produce. In the evenings, after the work was done, they would gather in the main room. Martha often retired early, leaving Clara and Xander to sit by the fire, sometimes talking, sometimes sharing comfortable silence while Clara sewed and Xander whittled or read. Jamie, growing stronger each day, became the center of their shared attention, his first smile sending both adults into delighted exclamations. It was during these quiet evenings that Clara began to realize her feelings for Xander were evolving beyond gratitude. She found herself watching him when he wasn't looking, admiring the gentle way he handled Jamie, the respect he showed to everyone around him, and the quiet competence with which he managed the ranch. When their hands accidentally touched as they both reached for Jamie, the brief contact sent warmth flooding through her that had nothing to do with the nearby fire. For his part, Xander seemed increasingly drawn to Clara. He began finding reasons to be in the house during the day, offering to hold Jamie while she worked, or asking her opinion on ranch matters that clearly required no female perspective. His normally reserved demeanor softened in her presence, and Martha more than once caught him smiling to himself after Clara had left the room. The first major snowfall came in early December, transforming the landscape into a gleaming white expanse. Clara stood at the window, Jamie in her arms, watching as Xander and the hands worked to clear paths between the house and barn. It's beautiful, isn't it? She whispered to her son, who stared with wide eyes at the unfamiliar sight. "This is your first snow, sweet boy." Later that day, as darkness fell, a concerned Xander returned from checking the cattle in the north pasture. "Storm's getting worse," he announced, stamping snow from his boots. "Might be snowed in for a few days." Martha nodded sagely. "I'll add extra to the stew tonight." "Clara, dear, would you fetch more firewood? We'll want to keep the stove going through the night." Clara bundled up in one of Xander's old coats and stepped onto the porch, surprised by the intensity of the wind that had picked up since sunset. She had just reached the wood pile when a particularly strong gust nearly knocked her off balance. A strong hand steadied her from behind. "Careful," Xander said, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "Let me get that for you." "I can manage," Clara protested, though she was grateful for his presence. Xander's expression grew serious as he looked at her. "You don't always have to do everything alone, Clara." Something in his tone made her pause. "I've had to for so long," she admitted quietly. "Since before Jamie was born." "Not anymore," Xander said, his voice barely audible above the wind. He stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "Not if you don't want to." Clara's heart hammered in her chest as she realized what he was saying. Before she could respond, Jamie's cry reached them from inside the house. The moment broken, Xander quickly gathered an armload of wood, and they hurried back inside. That night, after everyone else had gone to bed, Clara sat beside Jamie's cradle, watching him sleep. Her thoughts were in turmoil. The life she had imagined for herself and her son had never included falling for a rancher in the Wyoming territory. Yet here she was, unable to deny the feelings that had grown within her. "Is he sleeping well?" Xander's soft voice startled her. He stood in the doorway, hesitant to enter what had become her room. "Like an angel," Clara replied, gesturing for him to come in. "He's growing so fast." Xander approached the cradle, looking down at the sleeping infant with unmistakable affection. "He's strong like his mother." Clara felt a blush warm her cheeks. "I wasn't very strong when you found us." "That's where you're wrong," Xander countered, his eyes sincere. "It takes extraordinary strength to do what you did, to leave everything behind for your child's sake, to face the unknown alone." Their eyes met in the soft lamplight, and Clara felt the weight of unspoken words between them. Xander took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. "Clara, I need to say something, and I hope you won't think less of me for it." He paused, his hands clasped tightly before him. "I know you came here by chance, and I know you plan to leave come spring. But these past months with you and Jamie, they've meant more to me than I can say." Clara's breath caught in her throat as Xander continued. "I lost someone once, and I thought that part of me was gone forever."
But you.
"And Jamie. You've awakened something I thought was dead." His voice grew husky with emotion. "I'm falling in love with you, Clara Porter. And I already love that boy as if he were my own." Tears filled Clara's eyes as the words she had scarcely allowed herself to hope for hung in the air between them. "Xander, you don't need to answer now," he said quickly. "I know it's sudden, and you've been through so much. I just wanted you to know before you make any decisions about spring." Clara rose from her chair and crossed the small space between them. Gathering her courage, she reached up and placed her palm against his cheek. "It's not sudden for me," she whispered. "I think I've been falling for you since that first day when you held Jamie and promised to be his father." Xander's eyes widened, hope dawning in their blue depths. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he lowered his head until his lips met hers in a kiss so gentle it brought fresh tears to her eyes. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he murmured. "Not just for the winter. Stay with me, both of you." Clara's answer was another kiss, this one conveying all the love and hope that words could not express. The remainder of the winter passed in a blur of quiet joy for the newly formed family. Clara and Xander's relationship deepened with each passing day, their mutual love creating a warm haven against the harsh Wyoming winter. Jamie flourished under their combined care, his personality emerging as he grew stubborn like his mother, thoughtful like his surrogate father. Martha observed the blossoming romance with knowing smiles, occasionally remarking that she'd never seen her nephew so happy. The ranch hands, too, noticed the change in their boss, commenting that the perpetual furrow in his brow had finally disappeared. As winter gave way to the first tentative signs of spring, Xander approached Clara one evening after Jamie had been put to bed. He seemed nervous, removing his hat and turning it repeatedly in his hands. "Would you take a walk with me?" he asked. "Just to the ridge. The stars are bright tonight." Curious about his unusual request, Clara agreed, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the lingering chill. They walked in companionable silence until they reached a small rise overlooking the ranch. Below them, the house windows glowed warmly in the darkness, smoke curling from the chimney into the star-filled sky. "This was my father's favorite spot," Xander said, his voice soft with remembrance. "He used to say that from here, you could see everything that truly mattered." Clara followed his gaze across the ranch, the sturdy house, the barn, the corrals, and beyond to the pastures where cattle grazed by day. "It's beautiful, Xander." "It is now," he agreed, turning to face her. It wasn't for a long time after Sarah died. It was just land and buildings, a place to work until exhaustion drove out thought. He took her hands in his expression earnest in the moonlight. "Then you and Jamie came, and suddenly this place was alive again. You made it a home, Clara." Before she realized his intent, Xander was kneeling before her, still holding her hands. "I know we haven't known each other long in the counting of months, but in all the ways that matter, I feel I've known you forever." His voice trembled slightly. "I love you, Clara Porter. I love your son as my own. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife, of making this family official in the eyes of God and man?" Clara's vision blurred with tears of joy as she looked down at this man who had saved not just her life and her son's, but her heart as well. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Xander. Nothing would make me happier." His face transformed with a smile of such radiant joy that it took her breath away. Rising to his feet, he pulled her into his arms, sealing their engagement with a kiss that promised a lifetime of love. They were married 2 weeks later in the ranch house, with Reverend Thomas from the nearest town officiating. Martha held Jamie throughout the ceremony, the baby dressed in a small suit she had sewn for the occasion. Pete and Caleb stood as witnesses, both men awkwardly elegant in their Sunday best. Clara wore a simple dress of pale blue that Martha and she had worked on in secret, using fabric ordered specially from Cheyenne. Xander, seeing her descend the stairs, looked at her with such wonder that Clara felt like the most beautiful woman in the world. "I, Xavier James Sutton, take thee, Clara Elizabeth Porter, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he vowed, his voice steady and sure. "To have and to hold, from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." When Clara repeated the vows, adding her promise to love this man who had become everything to her, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. As Reverend Thomas pronounced them husband and wife, Xander gathered both Clara and Jamie into his embrace, completing the circle of their family. The spring and summer that followed were filled with hard work and profound happiness. Xander taught Clara about ranch life, while she transformed the somewhat Spartan house into a true home. Jamie took his first steps in the kitchen, toddling from Clara to Xander with delighted squeals, and spoke his first word, "Pa," to everyone's joy and Xander's unashamed tears. In the evenings, they would often sit on the porch, watching the sunset while Jamie played at their feet. During one such peaceful moment, Clara rested her head on Xander's shoulder. "Do you ever think about that day we met?" she asked. How different our lives might have been if you'd taken another trail? Xander's arm tightened around her waist. I believe we were meant to find each other, Clara. Some things are just written in the stars. Like us, she murmured, placing her hand over his. Like us, he agreed, pressing a kiss to her temple. As autumn painted the landscape once more in golds and reds, Clara shared news that completed their joy. She was expecting a child, due in the spring. Xander's reaction was everything she could have hoped for, his face alight with wonder as he knelt to press his ear against her still, flat stomach. Hello, little one, he whispered. Your ma, your brother Jamie, and I can't wait to meet you. That night, as they lay together in the darkness of their bedroom, Clara reflected on the journey that had brought her here from desperate despair on a dusty trail to complete happiness in the arms of a man who loved both her and her son without reservation. Xander, she whispered, not sure if he was still awake. Came his drowsy response. That day on the trail, when I was too weak to lift Jamie, and you said you'd be his father, did you mean it even then? Or was it just something to say? Xander rolled onto his side, facing her in the moonlight that filtered through the curtains. I meant every word, he said solemnly. The moment I saw you both, something shifted inside me. I couldn't explain it then, but I know now what it was. What? Clara asked, touching his face gently. It was my heart recognizing its home, he answered simply.
In you.
In Jamie. In the family we were meant to be. Clara kissed him then, pouring all her love into the gesture. As she drifted toward sleep in the circle of his arms, she thought of the desperate woman she had been, collapsing on that trail with her newborn son. Never could she have imagined that her greatest despair would lead to her greatest joy, a loving husband, a growing family, and a home filled with warmth and laughter. Outside, the Wyoming wind sang across the plains, carrying the promise of winter and, beyond that, spring with its new life and endless possibilities. Within the walls of the ranch house, Clara Sutton slept peacefully beside her husband, their son safe in his room across the hall, their unborn child cradled securely between them, a family forged from chance, cemented by choice, and blessed by love.